Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Chess Show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and we have a distinguished guest today, Professor Ken Regan. Welcome to the show.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me on, and welcome to my office again. And notice that my whiteboard has been wiped. No more
Oh,
quantum computing and finite automaton equations.
oh yeah, you're right. And also, of course, I would like to invite Dan. Welcome to the show. Dan is hosting, Dan Fleet is hosting several
Yeah,
titles.
good morning. Ken,
Yeah,
I'm disappointed in your whiteboard.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, it's. I have
yeah,
not put anything on it yet. So.
yeah. Yeah, it will be much busier and very soon.
Mhm.
So, in the meantime, Ken, tell us about the latest tournament. And of course, you have some very, very interesting games. I've seen some of these games, not all. And it's really, really very entertaining
Well,
stuff.
I've teed up one loss by Magnus Carlsen to show so far at the Granke tournament. Now the Granke tournament has an interesting format. It's 2 rounds a day, playing game 45 with a 10-second increment, which I liken to game 55. And it's not game 60 as a nomenclature thing here. Game 60, in whatever form, 45 plus 15, if you have 60 minutes for 60 moves, then I count that as a form of classical. But if it's game 55, anything less, I class it as a form of rapid. And it actually means that when I screen it, I use different formulas that are trained on rapid. But anyway, you could call this very slow rapid if you wish. It does tend to produce allegro finishes, and that may be the explanation for what happened at the end of this game. So first round, the tournament, Granke tournament, is notable because it is the first tournament to feature the last two, the current and former world champion, namely Jing Ziren and Magnus Carlsen. Um, so, so how would the ex-world champion fare in the first classical tournament he's played in 2024, because he did not play Vaikonce this time? He has simultaneously said that he doesn't think he's going to play classical again this year, but he's playing Norway chess, which is a format that includes classical um, as well as uh, tiebreak games and the event of draws, a format that was used at the London 1883 tournament. So, okay, so Caro-Kann advanced variation, a very popular way. And now with this Alpha Zero maybe inspired move to play H4, and Black commits to H5, thereby establishing that his bishop won't be trapped. So White goes to exchange off the bishop, and now we have a position. Again, looks like maybe some other forms of Caro, but with the H pawns opposing each other. Okay, so now we're still going to play some creative offbeat moves. We're going to play Queen A5 check, and I frankly don't understand the point of that move. C3, on the other hand, maybe the point is that however White responds to the check is going to be a little inconvenient, and White now has the inconvenience of trading the knights. And ordinarily, I would think, I'm a light square position player because I played the B6, the Enketo line as Black, so I might have expected to see Queen A6 as the intended follow-up to challenge the light squares, but that's not what Carlsen had in mind. Maybe Carlsen just playing chess, so he plays a standard idea, must say, C5. And I also must say there's really nothing wrong with Black's position here. So Queen A5 check had the idea that also it makes C5 effective because we're pinning on the diagonal. Okay, so White captures, Black captures with the queen. We have a nice queen now. Goes back so that White can't play bishop E3 with tempo, and it's eyeing E5. And Black decides to whip that off rather than play A6. So that's an interesting point. Let's see. The computer thinks A6 was an equally good move. Okay, so Now maybe black will think about play on the light squares again. This is after challenging e5. Can black take on e5? Well, let's see what the tactics would be there. Let's see. Can we play ahead in these positions? Let's see. We take on e5. And the problem is queen b5 check and losing the b pawn. It's very prosaic. It's not. There's nothing. No interesting pins. So therefore, black plays normal chess. Now white removes the queen. That's, I guess, again. Sometimes you retreat a piece preemptively, so that the other player cannot gain time by, for instance, going into e4. The computer does think white has a fairly persistent static advantage for a pawn, and it's going to grow after a move like this that might be a little bit too, risky in prospect. All right, so black castles. Now white's rook has been located on a4. I must say that this makes sense so long as you're happy with the trade of the e pawn for black's h pawn. Here we go. Black plays rook e8. Doesn't the computer actually wants black to go through with this capture? And actually, the recapture of the h pawn is not so well. It's an equally good move. It's not so impressive for white. So white can also pin and play queen d4 and win the pawn back on the king side, and you wind up with a rook ending where black has 3 pawn islands. But maybe that's not so bad for black. Okay, black did not capture. Black was happy to play in the center. Now black captures, but here the engine is telling us, oh, this is mistimed. So let's see. So why is it mistimed? Computer wants white to play queen h5. Now, this is all very, very tricky for me. You have to calculate more moves ahead to understand why white's playing queen h5 is better now than it would have been in the other hypothetical line. Anyway, Rapport played bishop f4. Now, the reason why bishop f4 is not as effective compared to a previous variation is fairly easy to see. White cannot reinforce it with queen d4. Its rook is standing on that square. So now it's not as easy for white to pile on e5. Queen h5 does so, but it allows black this well-timed defense. Now white's queen is under attack, and after the trade of queens, black's knight is off the e5 square, and the net result has not been favorable to white. Black has a solid center. We traded a center pawn for a wing pawn, and white's advantage, according to the computer, is down under half a pawn again, and black actually has some chances to expand here, more than I see white being able to do. Okay.
So under average circumstances, this is the kind of position that one might expect Magnus to be able to win from either side of the board.
Yes, I would say I would concur with that.
White, but this was not a normal day.
Yeah, it's not a normal game. Now, White's plan might involve pushing b4, b5, and using the fact that his bishop cuts black's knight off from d6 and e5 from coming to the 8 or the queen side. Of course, again, that has to be looked at tactically. How fast is black coming in the center? And it's prophylaxis against the center fork, which is black's most immediate threat, of course, that occasions Magnus to play bishop h2. Rapport to play bishop h2. And Magnus just moves his king. I guess doesn't want to play rook d8. Rook d8 hangs a pawn. Yeah. So the move black would love to play in this position is this rook to d8, but unfortunately not legal by the rules of chess. So, okay. All right. So we retreat the knight. Knight is coming to c6. Okay. Now pressure on the b pawn that way, and Carlsen decides to shed it and do this trade. But I must say this trade optically favors white. The computer doesn't think so. White's advantage is down to nothing. But the more open a position like this, and the fact that black's A pawn looks weaker than white's B pawn, ought to favor the side with the bishop. But okay, anyway, rook d7, knight c4. So black does in fact shed a pawn in this position for counterplay. This was very interesting about the very last stage of the game. So I'm sorry, white sheds a pawn. No, black sheds a pawn. Actually, right now, white is a pawn down. White is going to be a pawn up, not far from now. Okay, so now black cannot defend both e6 and d5. So Carlsen just decides to move his king. And there we go. We have, okay, so now we shed a6, pawns are even. And now we shed d5. So this is the key position at the end of the game. And this is very interesting to me. If I were just looking at this board, I would think white had really strong winning chances here because I don't see any coordinated attack of black's rook and knight. The bishop inflates the value of a c pawn. I don't see black having a super solid blockade on c4. Surely by putting white's king up to d3, we should be able to dislodge that. Plus, white's king seems to me to have a greater path to activity than black's king. And it's not necessarily clear to me that black can make effective counterplay on the king side. Of course, this is just a first impression. You have to look more closely at actual variations. And we have the all-seeing computer that says that after rook a2, black does in fact have sufficient counterplay in this position. Well, black
and white has a huge advantage on the clock too, which winds up becoming decisive.
Yeah, 1 minute to 18 seconds. Yes, and that actually is a whole possible vocation for me to decide what really is the rate, effect on one's rating of having only 18 seconds in a position like this. Well, we are about to see. Black makes first one misstep, and then so what the computer is saying very sensibly: get your king off of h6, put it back to h7, or put it on g6. Okay, so those are the only two moves that time things right before white is able to unentangle. But Carlsen played this very understandable move to hit the pawn, and now what the computer says is that white can go on the attack here with bishop f8 being a strong threat. Okay, so in this, why is this really effective for white? Well, apparently it is. Actually, what it is it's a mating net. You're going to take on g7 with the rook, and black's king can't go anywhere, and you'll have a mighty discovered check coming up. So, in fact, the computer says that, it's going to take with the bishop, I guess. Okay, all right. I know I'd fear taking with the rook, but let's just see. Rook c2, natural move. Rook takes g7, actually not as effective as bishop takes g7 check and bishop f8. Ooh, okay, mating. Oh, so you just changed the mechanism. That's the idea. Mm-hmm. Okay, now rook g7 check and discovered check is very much in the cards here. So, okay, so this is trouble for black. Okay, so anyway, Rapport did the natural thing. Rapport defended the pawn, and then Carlsen carried through with his plan. Unfortunately, a ruinous plan. Oops. And then Carlsen realized we're getting forked on e3 and loss of game. So a bit of a misadventure. Credit white with serving up good moves, giving black the chance to beat himself, and he did.
It's not very typical for Carlsen to overlook piece in a fairly simple position.
Yeah.
You see, he's getting older.
That's right. He's over 30, so
yeah. He's younger than Nakamura by almost 6 years.
Yeah,
or 5 years. Mm-hmm. That's going to be one of the fascinating things about the candidates tournament.
Right. So a notable tweet by Carlsen, giving his echelons of expectations for the candidates, and he put Caruana and Nakamura alone in top place. Then Firouzja and was Gukesh or Vidit? I forget. Gukesh.
I think Nepomniachtchi must have been in third, and then
Oh yeah,
was,
Nepomniachtchi in the
yeah.
third. Nepomniachtchi, Firouzja, and Gukesh. Well, let's see if I can find the tweet. Well, I'm still sharing my screen, right? So Magnus.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Magnus Carlsen. I think I'm following you now. Nope, I guess I'm not following him now. All right, follow him. And let's see if we can find this this tweet. Those are photos from the Granky. Wait. Oh wait, this is an older. Oh wait, oh wait, this is the wrong Magnus Carlsen account, maybe. Replies. Let's see. March 25. This is up to date. The truth. Oh. February 10. February 2. I guess this is it. Oh, that's funny. I don't see where. Okay, I don't see the tweet. I saw it was in my Twitter feed, maybe reposted by Anish Giri. And wait, I thought I was following Nakamura too. All right, well, okay. All right. Of course, Anish Giri has the best Twitter account, I have to say. So let's see. Here it is. So Anish Giri tweeting of Vladimir. Oh, no, this is different. That's a play on this. This is it. Well, this is Anish Giri's take with Carolina. Likely to win, but he was quoting. He was quoting this. Apparently, this is Carlsen's take. Okay, so I did not see it on Carlsen's Twitter. This was probably circulated elsewise. But you're right, Nepomniachtchi, and then Firouzja and Prajnananda. Okay. So these are the tiers that he was putting, and Altasadarov down at the beginning. So there's some crosstalk going on. Anyway, let me go back to this interesting game, and let's see. Whoops, I've probably done something with my screen that's not so kosher. Oh, here we are. Okay. So, so this is the game between the two world champions. So let's take a look. It's a fairly sedate game, but still worth playing through. You can see the chess.com accuracy scores are both about 96, but I have my issues with the chess.com accuracy score anyway. Okay. All right. So I don't know how much of this is book. Game gets a little interesting when white plays g4, but we're going to curb white's enthusiasm by just playing solidly as black. And that you can't get much more solid than not castling and putting your knight on e6 first before deciding what to do. And now you've driven white's bishop back. So black just has to make sure that he doesn't get a position where he's going to be steamrolled in the center. But there are all sorts of safeguards against that. For instance, white, even if the e-file were to be opened, white is not close to positioning a rook to check black's king along the e-file. So, all right, so black casts queenside. And this is the first move by black to undo the double pawns and establish a beachhead. Now white cannot easily play either e4 or f4. Okay, both moves concede squares. So black, in fact, now is able to make some noise in the center this way. Black's activity compensates for the missing pawn, and in fact, Carlsen decided to jettison a pawn right away. Now, this does say that that white has achieved something. Okay, black has to play this move, and now rook c2. By the way, this is one just interesting point about this is the exclamation point is automatically conferred by chess.com anytime the next move is really inferior. So for instance, what the engine evaluation is saying here is that if white plays any move other than queen b3, for instance, trading queens, then black's positional choice is really vindicated. Okay, black have a substantial advantage, but this keeps an advantage for white. Now we're getting an exclamation point here, but it should be understood that d4 is a pretty forced response as a way. You don't retreating the bishop just hangs this pawn, so you need to do something with a little bit more calculation, so that you see that that hanging this pawn will enable you to do a counterattack. In particular, the counter.
Yeah, I guess chess.com probably doesn't have a box function that they can use for only move.
Yeah, and but it's a question of only move. When is an only move an automatic move, or when is it really a deep move? That's one of the issues that I'm going to be lecturing on in my seminar in 3 hours. My model tries to account for difficulty of chess positions.
Right.
And I'm also going to be mentioning this in a post that I am writing right now, an article writing right now on Daniel Kahneman, who passed away yesterday, and several of whose points are relevant to my chess work. So anyway, this is something you calculate. This is the one exciting part of the game, and you need to assess that black has enough zing moves to constitute enough counterplay for. Well, it's not actually an extra pawn by white anyway. Okay. Anyway, so d4, and Carlsen did not trade the bishop, but instead put the counterplay on the. So we get some excitement for a little bit. Okay, so now we sacrifice an exchange, and in fact, I'd like to ask why and how the evaluation slipped to be a pawn ahead for white when, according to this, black was equal and did nothing wrong. Okay. All right. So here, the engine says that white squandered advantage here that could have been had by playing an active move, bishop c4. Well, okay. Now black has. Okay, so that's said to be a bad move. Let's see. Black should just sit on this position. White's tied down. Black is defending everything. White can't.
Yeah, I guess the general principle here is that that in a position of unbalanced material like this, that black wants to keep his rook on the board.
Yes,
At least that's how I was always taught.
Yeah. So general principle: when you're down in exchange, or when you have two pieces for a rook, the side with only one rook wants to keep rooks on the board. But Ding Xiren doesn't do that, and the engine says
that's because he's the world champion. Huh.
Right. Yes. but the Magnus Carlsen, unfortunately, was also a world champion, and therefore overlooked a very simple principle that if you take black's rook, you have the only wide-ranging piece on the board. So of course, white should take black's rook and double up another of black's pawns besides, but instead rook c4, and now okay, so now black actually has battened down the hatches pretty well. Okay, and so here we go. So this gets a double exclam. Why? It's only 0.07 versus the other moves being 0.00 nothing. Black isn't. There isn't really. I don't see any squares that are more terrible for black's knight to hop to. It is sort of almost Zugzwang, as in white's bishop doesn't want to move, as that gives squares to black's knights. Although, so the engine recommends whipping off black's knight, and black decides to simplify. Why bother with that? I guess it doesn't matter. We've got a bishop's opposite colors endgame with locked pawns, and this is just totally drawn. Doesn't matter if a couple of pawns fall off. there's just no progress to be made, and they agree to draw. So,
Yeah. Very interesting. You always enjoy watching games by former world champions, if not
right,
the world champions. At least one of them is probably still the strongest player. But we'll see very soon. All that can change.
right.
It
Yes,
seems
it's a question of how soon will it take for the young generation to surpass them? They have ratings in the range, around 2750. How many of them will progress up to the range around 28, 25, where people like Caruana, and I think even Vache Lagrave, and Kramnik was, and Anand surpassed. So that's the measure.
I would think that it would take another 2 years to really change the rank of the
Mhm.
strongest players in the world. I think 2 years is quite sufficient time. Because Carlsen, he's not playing classical chess essentially, so his the ability to progress from where he is now in classical chess fairly limited, and the other players will aggressively try to close the gap in the next couple of years. That's what the way I see it. Now, who is going to be exactly? That's remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Yeah, the gap between Carlsen and the rest of the field is it's not historic, but it's near historic, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Kasparov opened up quite a gap. Fischer, of course, had an extraordinary gap, but at least in recent memory, when you take Carlsen out, there are 10 to 15 folks who on a given day can, so it really is Carlsen versus the field in a lot of these events.
Yeah, but Fischer's supremacy lasted about 3 years, from 70 to 72. Although he was probably the strongest player prior to that, but there were players like Spassky and a few others who could fight him and did so quite fiercely. And 70 to 72 is exceptional time when one player was so dominant and far exceeded anybody else.
Yeah, at least in our lifetime, probably Kasparov's period
Kasparov was longer.
From the time that he separated from Karpov until he lost the match against Kramnik that was quite exceptional too.
Yeah, you're talking about 10 solid years from 19 to 2001. And even prior to 1990, he showed his supremacy over Karpov and therefore anybody else around 1986, I would say, when he won his London match, London and St. Petersburg, I think. He showed already quite a supremacy over Karpov. And there's just a drop a little bit down in Seville match in 1977, I think, right? No,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess kind of I guess kind of an interesting historical rumination would be to consider someone like Caruana today and imagine him as a contemporary to someone like Karpov, and imagine whether there would have been a separation there. It's my impression that Karpov at his peak was historically strong, but that's perhaps a recollection or so, and it may not be borne out by studies of his game. So
yes, one of the points.
Ken, you may have a thought on that.
Well, one of the points that I've always faced is the fact that while he was historically strong, Karpov's rating was only barely above 2,700. And when he faced Korchnoi in 1981, no one was above 2,700.
Which seems wild.
Seems wild, but I do measure the that is being correct. Mm-hmm. In other words, I've always said that by my quality measures, today's high 2700s players deserve their ratings. So even though relative to their peers, they're not as standalone as Karpov was. So this is the 2 points of view in a paper with Guy Howarth and Bartek Macheya from 2011 that you can find on my website. As to
I believe that you're right about Karpov's rating. You see, when you study his games, it's very important to understand the great role of psychology in his games. He felt his opponents so well, and he felt the critical moment in a game when the normal pattern of the game is drastically changing. And at that time, he was prepared to take a risk considering the psychological nature of the game, and he was at the best. Probably he exceeded all chess players of all times to feel his opponent, and that's while his game, if you look at the move by move, it doesn't show his superiority over other strong grandmasters, but that one psychological detail put him on top of everybody else at that time when he was reigning. That's my opinion. Anyway, listen, I would like to thank you very much for today's program, and we will have even more interesting program.
Yes, candidates start.
Candidates will start.
Yeah.
We'll see
on Wednesday, and with the schedule I caused to be shifted when I pointed out the eclipse, and many months ago. And the Canadian zonals are occurring right now. So,
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Exciting.
Thank you so much. We'll see
Thank
you
you.
next week, same place, same time.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Good to see you, Dan. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Good to see you, Ken.